What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to week 2 of my weekly NFL Picks show for the 2014-2015 NFL season. Now, I can't wait to tell you about my big hits and my big misses from week 1, but before we get into that, gotta do a little bit of housekeeping. For anybody that paid attention to the comments section of the week 1 video, you'll know that I got into it with, you know what, I'm not going to say his name, but if you paid attention, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And it actually led me to do something I've never had to do on YouTube before. I actually had to ban someone from my channel. I figured it was better to address it here than kind of leave it lingering, so here we go. The issue with this person was I took Green Bay +5 as one of my big 3 ATS picks last week. And where the issue arose is not that he disagreed with the pick. That's totally fine. Anyone who watches any of my picks is 100% free to disagree with them. As a matter of fact, Gio himself told me on my 3 gambling tickets last week that he didn't agree with any of them. And that's perfectly fine, but there's disagreement and then there's whining. And this person definitely crossed that line. This person not only continually badgered and bitched and moaned and whined about the fact that I didn't take his team against the spread, even though I did take his team to win the game straight up, something that I will prove with a screenshot from my week 1 video right now. So as you can see right there, in very plain English, right at the beginning of the rest of my picks for week 1, I actually took Seattle to win that game. Since I know you're watching, is that proof enough for you, little one? Now, had this person bothered to actually watch the full video instead of just pausing it when he got to something that he didn't like and felt the need to go in the comments section and whine about it, maybe he would have seen that and maybe it wouldn't have gone as far as it did. But when it got to the point that nothing was constructive anymore and it had just devolved into pettiness and making it personal and all of this garbage, it was time to cut the line. For the record, I don't like banning people from my channel. I, again, have never done it before up until this point. Unfortunately, it was just time to cut the cord there, so safe travels, shove off, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Now, with that stupidity taken care of, let's take a look at how I did in week 1 before we get on to my picks for week 2. Really, there's only one word I can use to describe my results in week 1. Average. In the big 3 against the spread last week, I was only 1-2. The only one that worked out was the Carolina pick. Of course, I got the Green Bay +5, the disputed ATS pick, as well as favoring New Orleans, I think -3 in the game against Atlanta. Both of those didn't work out because both of those teams lost their games, and Green Bay lost their game heavily. So I'm only 1-2 to start the year on the big 3 against the spread. However, I did kind of pull it together with the rest of the against the spread picks, which again you can find in the description of the video. Overall in week 1, I was 7-8-1 against the spread. Straight up, I only went 9-7. There were some big time upsets, and you know, it was a little shocking, but you know, that's what happens, and that's kind of what happens in week 1. Taking a look at how the platinum, gold, silver, and bronze picks did, when I said average, I mean average. I was only 2-2 on the platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, unfortunately. We start with the bronze pick, where I took Carolina to beat Tampa Bay. That worked out. Carolina beat Tampa Bay 20-14. No Cam Newton with a rib injury, apparently no problem for the Panthers. Derek Anderson stepped in and did exactly what a backup quarterback in that position needs to do. You don't need to be a superstar, you need to manage the game and give your team a chance to win. That's exactly what Derek Anderson did. He went 24 of 34 passing for 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, managed the ball, kept the ball in Carolina's hands. Really, that's all you need to do. And again, I talked about Carolina's defense. As far as I'm concerned, Carolina's defense was as advertised in week 1 against Tampa Bay. They generated 3 sacks, deflected 6 passes, and came up with 2 interceptions. For the silver pick, I took New England to beat Miami. That did not work out. I said the more things change, the more they stay the same. Apparently, the more things change, the more things change. Miami puts up a 2-possession win on New England, beating the Patriots 33-20. Again, I certainly didn't think that this was going to happen, and I certainly don't think that this means some kind of changing of the guard in the AFC East. But you know what? This is a strong Week 1 win for the Dolphins. This is momentum. They'll be able to carry this through the next couple of weeks. It's certainly not time to sound the alarm in New England, but it was a little alarming, I guess, that they would lose to a divisional opponent that, in general, they tend to dominate. The gold pick, I told you to take the Chicago Bears over the Buffalo Bills. That shit didn't work out either. Buffalo with a come-from-behind 23-20 win. I can't remember if that game got to overtime or not, but it was decided on a field goal. This, to me, was the biggest upset of the week. Mark Trestman, who I've hailed as a pretty damn good coach, and I do think he is a pretty damn good coach, he basically summed this up perfectly in one of his quotes from the post-game interview. You keep them to the 17 to 20 point range, that should be enough for us to win. Unfortunately, it was not. Again, I don't think it's time to sound the alarm in Chicago, but that's a game that Chicago should have won, and that could have big playoff implications. We move on to the platinum pick, where, of course, I told you to take the Philadelphia Eagles to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. The game didn't exactly go as expected, but it still ended on the happy side of par for me. The Eagles spotted the Jags the first 17 points of the game. So again, this was not exactly the blowout that I anticipated. Luckily, it still ended pretty decisively by 3 possessions, but it certainly was not the blowout that I expected it to be. Jags go up 17-0. Philly goes on to score 34 unanswered points on the Jags and end up with the win. But on the plus side, they did end up pulling it out 34-17. So I got my platinum pick, got my bronze pick, missed the gold and silver. Taking a look at the private pick'em now, as I mentioned before, I went 9-7 overall on the week. That only has me in 27th place out of the 32 teams that are in my pick'em league. Holy cow. I got some work to do. Shout out to our Week 1 winner and our overall leader, Teddy Ted's Varsity Squad. Now, Teddy Ted's Varsity Squad only went 10-6 on the week, so only 1 up, 1 down from where I was. However, out of those 10, they managed to rake in 95 of 136 possible confidence points, a clip of 70%. My problem was, in those 7 losses, there were some really big confidence point totals because of some upsets, so I really lost out on a lot of points there. But congrats to Teddy Ted's Varsity Squad for being the Week 1 winner as well as our overall leader. Alright folks, enough of the past, let's get into the present. Week 2 picks, we're going to start with the Big 3 against the spread. So my number 3 pick on the Big 3 against the spread this week comes in the St. Louis at Tampa Bay game. Tampa Bay are currently favored by 5.5 points at home. Even though Tampa Bay did lose to Carolina last week, it was a 1-possession game, and it was a pretty close game right down to the wire. Everybody seemed to think that St. Louis had a really, really good defense until that Week 1 game happened. 2 choices for the Rams. They either come out of that game really motivated, or that game was crushing for them. In conjunction with the loss of Sam Bradford, I'm leaning on the side of crushing. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay can come away from that Carolina game with some positives, with some places to grow, but with some things that they were doing really well. So, you know what? 5.5 points, it's not too many for me. I'm going to take Tampa Bay minus 5.5 at home to St. Louis. My number 2 pick on the Big 3 against the spread this week comes in the Houston at Oakland game. Oakland sit as 3-point dogs at home. Houston might have been one of the surprises of the week for me, beating Washington, I believe it was 17-6. Now Houston travels to Oakland, where the Raiders are, well, the Raiders. This would be an interesting discussion, by the way. In the comments section below, I want you to tell me who you think the worst team in the NFL is. There's some interesting options there. I mean, the Jags do not have a good team, yet they put up 17 points on Philly last week. Oakland's got a really bad team. Buffalo does not have a good team, and yet they won in Week 1. So I want you to tell me, who do you think is the worst team in the NFL? I'm sorry, I should actually get back to talking about the game. I kind of went back and forth on this a little bit because I kind of like taking home dogs, but you know what? I think I'm going to go with Houston here. Only putting up 17 points on a Redskins defense that is not great is not exactly impressive, but it looks like Houston's kind of getting their run game going again. So I'm going to take Houston minus 3 in Oakland. And my top pick on the Big 3 against the spread this week comes in the Arizona at New York Giants game. Arizona is currently favored by 1 point on the road in New York. I always like grabbing onto these 1-point games because they're essentially pick'ems. Who do I think is going to win the game? And quite frankly, these were 2 very different looking teams in Week 1. People can talk all they want about the Giants having a quote-unquote developing offense. The offense begins and ends with Eli Manning, and Eli Manning made very bad decisions in week 1. Now don't get me wrong, it's not all on Eli. His receivers ran bad routes a time or two. He really had to get on them. But this hand signal business, this mariachi dancing that they're doing, it's not going to work. The Giants have an extremely talented wide receiver 1 in Victor Cruz. They have a developing, very talented wide receiver 2 in Ruben Randle. Eli Manning's won Super Bowls. This is not a bad team. They're just playing really bad football. I hang no blame for the Giants' week 1 loss on their defense. The defense is actually quite good, especially their front line, but I mean, that defense is not going to win them games. It's going to keep them in games, but it's not going to win them games. Meanwhile, I look at Arizona, and Arizona came back from, I believe it was, 11 points down to win that game on Monday night? Despite the fact that they looked a little shaky at times, I actually thought the Cardinals played a pretty good game in week 1. Again, in a game that's essentially a pick'em, I'm going to take the team I think is going to win, and the team that I think is going to win is Arizona. So for my top pick on the Big 3 against the spread this week, I'm going to take Arizona, favored by 1 point, on the road in New York. Once again, I'll remind you that you can check out all of my Against the Spread picks for Week 2 in the description to the video. And if you're interested in joining the Bridgewater's Finest Pick'em League Season 3, that information is in the description as well. Alright folks, now it's time to take a look at the Platinum, Gold, Silver, and Bronze straight-up picks for Week 2. We're going to start with the Bronze pick where I am 1-0, and this will be my little forgiveness for Senor Poopy Pants in the comment section last week. My Bronze pick is the Seattle Seahawks on the road going into San Diego to play the Chargers. As I said, the Chargers are a good team, and I think they're a better team when they play at home. Phillip Rivers is a good, borderline great quarterback. They've got receiving options. They've got a run game. San Diego is actually, I think, a more complete team than people give them credit for. Meanwhile, we have the Seahawks, who, even when they're not playing at home, are an elite team. So for the second week in a row, the second one, I'm going to take the Seahawks to win straight up, and this time I'm going to take them as a featured game. My Bronze pick is the Seattle Seahawks to beat the San Diego Chargers in San Diego. My Silver pick, where I'm 0-1, sees the Denver Broncos at home for the second week in a row, welcoming division rival Kansas City. Was everybody else as entertained as hell as I was watching that Denver-Indianapolis game on Sunday night? Shoutouts to my buddy Anthony Cormier, who was with his girlfriend in the stands at Mile High watching that game last week. It was his favorite all-time quarterback, Peyton Manning, against his historically favorite team, the Indianapolis Colts, and he got treated to probably an early contender for Game of the Year in the NFL. Kansas City. If you guys have been following my videos historically, you know that I really haven't been on the Kansas City bandwagon. I jumped on the bandwagon last season because I was like, well, the results don't lie, and the results are Kansas City's playing really well. But in that Week 1 game, they got simply murdered. And what the hell were they doing with Jamal Charles? The point spread in this game currently sits at Denver favored by 13.5. If I would have been, I was tempted. I almost played that on the Big 3 against the spread. I wanted to take KC plus 13.5 because for a divisional game, that just seems like too much. And if KC had looked any better in Week 1, I might have done that. Unfortunately, they looked like garbage. They looked like they couldn't compete in the Eastern Conference of the CFL. I mean, let's be honest, Denver's going to destroy here. If I was playing the line, like I said, I still might be tempted to go that KC plus 13.5, but straight up, this is the Broncos all day, every day. I'm going to take Denver at home for my Silver pick. The Gold pick, I'm back to riding that Packer train. The Green Bay Packers at home against the New York Jets. The Seahawks did what the Seahawks are great at in Week 1, which is exposed a team's weaknesses. And Green Bay's defense definitely got exposed, especially towards the latter part of that game. The Jets were impressive in beating Oakland in Week 1. But coming into Lambeau Field, I think the Jets are bringing a knife to a bazooka fight. I don't think the Jets stand any chance of covering Green Bay's weapons, which, yes, buddy from my comment section, Green Bay does have weapons. Luckily, one of them's not going to be covered by Richard Sherman this week. You know, this is just a little sidebar. Green Bay played that game against Seattle scared. Well, guess what? They're not scared of the Jets. and they're not going to play the game like they're scared of the Jets. They're going to destroy the Jets. I'm going to take Green Bay at home to beat the Jets. That's the gold pick. And the platinum pick is going to come in the New Orleans at Cleveland game. You know what? I got to give props to Hoyer. He brought Cleveland back in that game against Pittsburgh. I thought that game was done, and he really he was pulling them back a little bit. And you know what? Hoyer's the right choice behind center right now. New Orleans has to be one of the most upset teams in the league. Not quite as upset as New England, I'm sure, but New Orleans has to be one of the most upset teams in the league because they had that game won against Atlanta, and basically their defense gave it up. So New Orleans is going to have the opportunity to kind of stunt on defense a little bit, hopefully get an early lead, pin their ears back, and really come after Hoyer. You might see Johnny Manziel in this game if it becomes a blowout. I think it's going to be a blowout. I'm going to take New Orleans to beat Cleveland on the road. I can't see New Orleans starting the season 0-2, so New Orleans over Cleveland, that's the platinum pick. And here are the rest of my straight-up picks for Week 2 in the NFL. Check them. That's the Week 2 show for you folks. Comments, hate, and love, you know where they go. Comment section below, just to give you a little update on how fantasy football went in Week 1, because of course it's not just regular football, it's fantasy football time. I won 2 of my leagues, I lost 2 of my leagues. Like I said, I think the one league I lost because Jamal Charles did nothing. The other league I lost, unfortunately, was the Week 1 matchup in the YouTube Prognosticators ESPN Fantasy League. I lost that to Chris Mears of Mole and Mears. So Mears, thank you very much. And good win on ya. Now, Week 2, I believe I step up to the challenge of the Hatbox. Almost said kid. I think I step up to the challenge of Hatbox Does Football. So Chris Carter, Hatbox, here it comes. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video, unless you're he who shall not be named. And again, all my ATS picks are in the description of the video. How to join the Pick'em League is in the description of the video. I know there's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of great people doing these videos. In the description to my video, I have links to a lot of those people. Or you can go to geoknows.com. A bunch of them are listed there. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, Week 2, NFL 2014-2015. See you again in Week 3.